Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at the failure at Kadesh. Numbers chapters 13 and 14 are our continuing study of the book of Numbers. In Numbers 11, and this is sort of a segment, we have the cry of the people. They're tired of what they're eating, and God responds by giving them quail to eat. They're hip deep in birds, but then he also gives judgment. And then we moved to chapter 12, where we have the complaint by Aaron and Miriam against Moses, because the spark that set it off was because he had taken a Cushite wife, but we felt there was more to the story than that. Now we come to chapter 13, where there's going to be the mission of the spies. They're going to be sent into the land of Canaan to spy out the land. And again, we're going to see complaint. This time it's going to be about Canaan, but really it's going to be directed against, again, Moses and against God. And then finally in chapter 14, we're going to see another cry of the people. This time they'll be crying about what happened in Canaan and about just the largeness of the people in the land. God's going to pass judgment. So there's going to be the cry of the people, there's going to be judgment, and his judgment is that they're going to be wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, but they're going to rebel against that and try to go in their own power, and they're going to be defeated at Kadesh. So that's the big picture. Let's look at the details. Numbers chapter 13, verse 1, Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Send out for yourself men, so that they may spy out the land of Canaan, which I am going to give to the sons of Israel. You shall send a man from each of their fathers' tribes, every one a leader among them. So he's to send out not only spies, but these are going to be the leaders of the tribes. Now the question comes up, why are the spies sent into Canaan at all? Because we know how this is going to turn out. It's not going to turn out good. So why even send them? And the answer is seen in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 21, 22, and 23, where God says, Then all of you approached me and said, Let us send men before us, that they may search out the land for us and bring back to us word by the way which we should go up, and the cities which you shall enter. And the thing pleased me, and I took 12 of your men, one man for each tribe. So really, we're told in Deuteronomy, we don't find that in the book of Numbers, but we're told in Deuteronomy that the people requested, and God was answering their requests and allowing them to spy out the land and find out which way they're going, get directions, and go in the appropriate way. It's also going to be a test, though. So Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, and he said to them, Go up there into the Negev, and then go up into the hill country. They're in the south there in Sinai, and they're to go north to the Negev, because that's the way you go to get to Canaan. Now that word Negev, it literally means desert, but it also came to be used as one of the four cardinal directions once they get into the land of Canaan. So, we use terms like north and south and east and west. And Negev is their word for south, but it means desert because if you're in Canaan, it's to the south of you. And then if you're in Canaan, to the west is the sea, the Yam. And so that becomes the word for both west, but also it's the word for sea. And then Kadem is the word for front. We oriented our maps so that north is on top. If they were into map making, and eventually they would be, not yet, but when they would be, we find a very old map. It's actually called the Masaba map in Jordan. And east is on top. When you look at the way the labels are oriented, they put east at the top of their map. So it's very different. And then Safon was to hide, and I guess the hidden place up in the north. I'm not sure what that had reference to. Numbers chapter 13, verse 25, Then they returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days, and they proceeded to come to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. So it's Kadesh, but it's actually south. Paran is a bit south of Kadesh, but they're connected here. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. So they actually bring produce from the land. They'd probably, gone and by night maybe picked some of the fruit. Thus they told him and said, We went into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruits, just as God had promised. Nevertheless, here's the problem. The people who live in the land are strong. You see, the land was already inhabited. It's inhabited by Canaanites. That's why we call it the land of Canaan. And the people that live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. And we say, well, who on earth is that? So we're told Amalek is living in the land of the Negev, that's south of Canaan, And the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites are living in the hill country, and the Canaanites are living by the sea. No matter where you turn, there's people there by the side of the Jordan. So there's people all over the land of Canaan. It's inhabited not just by one people, but by a host of people. And then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "We should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we will surely overcome it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We're not able to go up against the people, for they're too strong for us." So they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out. And here's what they say, saying, "The land through which we have gone in spying it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw in it are men of great size. There also we saw the Nephilim." Now that's a word we haven't seen since back in Genesis chapter 6. That term Nephilim means the fallen ones. And then notice the writer sort of inserts the sons of Anak are part of the Nephilim. It wasn't a separate group, but it's part of the people that were there. "And we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." Now that's not literally, but that's, in other words, they were big and they were tall and they were nasty. It's like describing a big burly biker. You know, it's like I don't want to necessarily see him in a dark alley. So we have noticed in chapter 11 there was a cry of the people. Chapter 12 the complaint by Aaron and Miriam against Moses, and now we have the complaint of the spies against Canaan. And that brings us to chapter 14, the cry of the people. Because the people again cry out. That brings us full circuit. "Then all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. All the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, 'Would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness.'" Why would they want to die? They're still living. There's still hope there. While you, my wife likes to say, while you still draw a breath, there is hope. "Or would that we had died in the wilderness." Verse 3, "Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become plunder. Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? Why don't we go back?" And Joshua the son of Nun, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, of those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes, and they spoke to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, saying, "The land which we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey." Look at the rewards! The rewards are great. "Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they will be our prey. Their protection has been removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them." See, God was bringing judgment upon the land of Canaan, and their protection had been removed. And so he says, don't worry, God's protecting you. He's with us. Don't fear them. You say, well, they're big, but God is bigger. But all the congregation said to stone them with stones. They were actually going to put Caleb and Joshua and Moses and Aaron to death. And then the glory of the Lord appeared in the tent of meeting to all the sons of Israel. God shows up. And the Lord said to Moses, "How long will this people spurn me? And how long will they not believe in me, despite all the signs which I have performed in their midst?" God says, I'm going to smite them with a pestilence and dispossess them. They're my people, but I'm going to make them not my people. And I will make you, Moses, into a nation greater and mightier than they. We'll just sort of start over again. And Moses intercedes. Moses said to the Lord, "Then the Egyptians will hear of it, for by your strength you brought up this people from their midst, and they'll tell it to the inhabitants of this land, and they've heard that you, O Lord, are in the midst of this people, for you, O Lord, are seen eye to eye while your cloud stands over them, and you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Now if you slay this people, as you've said you're going to do, and if you slay them as one man, then the nations who've heard your fame will say, well, because the Lord could not bring this people into the land which he promised them by oath, therefore he slaughtered them in the wilderness. God wasn't big enough, he wasn't strong enough, and the people of the world, the people of the land, the people of the rest of the world, are going to look at that, and it will bring dishonor unto the name of God. And so Moses goes on, he says, but now I pray, let the power of the Lord be great, just as you have declared. And now he quotes God's words, God's description of God back to God. The Lord is slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but he will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children of the third and fourth generation. And he's quoting the law, and he's quoting God's description of God back to God. Pardon, I pray, Moses says, the iniquity of this people according to the greatness of your loving kindness. As your loving kindness is great, as your, and I like the translation I suggest for loving kindness, it's a good word, but I'm not sure it really gets it. God's loyalty, his loyal love. And as the greatness of your loyalty is great, just as you also forgiven this people from Egypt even until now, he asks, God, forgive. Forgive according to your loyalty. And so the Lord said, I have pardoned them according to your word. But indeed, as I live, all the earth will be filled with the glory of the Lord. I think that's one of the greatest verses of the Bible. God says, look, here's what I'm planning. It's not just about Israel. It's not just about Canaan. I have in mind the whole world. And there's coming a day when all the earth, yes, the land, yes, Egypt, yes, Israel, but all the earth will be filled with the glory of the Lord. Surely all the men who've seen my glory and my signs which I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, yet have put me to the test these 10 times. And we've read about this again and again and again. And they've not listened to my voice. They shall by no means see the land which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who spurned me see it. You see, they believed what the spies had seen and reported, and now they're not going to see it for themselves because they rejected me. But my servant Caleb, because he has had a different spirit and has followed me fully, I'll bring into the land. He's going to go enter into the land which he entered, and his descendants shall take possession of it. Say to them, as I live, says the Lord, just as you have spoken in my hearing, so I will surely do to you. Your corpses will fall in the wilderness. You said, it would be better if we died in the wilderness? Okay, you're going to get your wish. That's what you wanted. Your corpses will fall in this wilderness, even all your numbered men. Remember, there'd been a numbering. According to your complete number from 20 years old and upward who have grumbled against me. That had been all of them. Surely you shall not come into the land which I swore to settle you, except for Caleb the son of Jehunah and Joshua the son of Nun. These two who had given a positive report. They're going to go in, but none of the rest of you. Because this is the land that I swore. Literally, I lifted my hand. And so he had lifted his hand, and now he's going to lift his hand against them to have them die in the wilderness. Your children, however, whom you said would become a prey, you were so worried about your children, well, I'm going to give it to them. I will bring them in, and they will know the land which you have rejected. But as for you, your corpses will fall in this wilderness. You were using them as an excuse. I'm going to take your excuse and give them the land, but I'm not going to give it to you. Verse 33, your sons shall be shepherds for 40 years in the wilderness, and they will suffer for your unfaithfulness. They're not going to go in right now. They're going to go in 40 years from now until your corpses die in the wilderness. Because of actually the Hebrew word zanut, literally because of your fornication. It's, yes, unfaithfulness, but it's that unfaithfulness as though Israel were the bride and the Lord is the husband, and you've adulterated yourself. You've been unfaithful with me. According to the number of days which you spied out the land, 40 days they had been spying out the land. For every day you shall bear your guilt a year. Now even 40 years corresponding to those 40 days, and you will know my opposition. And so notice the judgment against that generation. It's only the adults, only the guilty, because those are remember Joshua and Caleb, they hadn't been guilty, so it's not against them. And their children would eventually receive the land. And their children, though, would have to endure the next 38 years of wandering, where they will not be able to go into the land until that previous generation has died in the wilderness. Now notice the contrast that's here with Jesus in the New Testament. Israel had been led by God, and yet we're told in the New Testament there comes a time when Jesus is led by the Spirit to go out into the wilderness. Here they'd got into the Sinai wilderness. In Jesus' case, he went to, we're told, into the Judean wilderness. In Israel's case, they would wander in the wilderness for 40 years. Jesus went into the wilderness for 40 days. In Israel's case, there was miraculous food throughout his wilderness duration of 40 days. He had nothing to eat, but then at the end of that time, the angels came and ministered to him and brought him food. The story of Israel, that's very early in the history of the nation, as Israel has this wilderness experience. They'll always look back to this of a lesson that they should have learned. And likewise, in the case of Jesus, his ministry will begin with this 40 days in the wilderness, after which we're going to see his ministry. Most people think it took place over a 3-year period. In the case of Israel, Israel was described, yes, as God's bride, but also God's son, his firstborn son. And Jesus was the Son of God. Oh, I should say Jesus is the Son of God. Now, chapter 14, verse 39, then Moses spoke these words to all the sons of Israel, and the people mourned greatly. And in the morning, however, they rose up early and went up to the ridge of the hill country, saying, here we are. We've indeed sinned, but we're going to go up to the place which God has promised. It reminds me sometimes where somebody sins in the church, and judgment is passed, and they say, okay, judgment's passed, but now I'm going to go forward. I've actually read and known of instances of pastors within the church, maybe even a senior pastor, very well known, who sinned greatly. And he said, okay, I sinned. I did something that disqualified me, but I've repented, so now I should continue going on. And that's just not right. It's not right there, and it wasn't right here. But Moses said, why are you transgressing the commandment of the Lord when it will not succeed? God told you his judgment, and now you're going to pretend he didn't say that. Do not go up. Don't try to go up under your own effort, or you will be struck down before your enemies, for the Lord is not among you. But they went up heedlessly to the ridge of the hill country. Neither the ark of the covenant of the Lord nor Moses left the camp. Moses stays back with God, with the presence of God, with the throne of God. That's the ark. And then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down, and they struck them and beat them down as far as Hormah. This is a reminder, and we have the New Testament application of this in Hebrews chapter 3, verses 7 following, where the writer of the Hebrews says, therefore, just as the Holy Spirit says, today if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts, as when they provoked me, as in the days of trial in the wilderness, where your fathers tried me by testing me, and saw my work for 40 years. Therefore I was angry with this generation, and I said, they always go astray in their heart, and they did not know my ways, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. Take care, brethren, and this is the application, that there be not in any one of you an evil, unbelieving heart that falls away from the living God. But encourage one another day after day, as long as it is still called today, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. We ought to be careful that we take God seriously, that we do not find ourselves bypassing the Lord and trying to go our own way, that we labor to enter his rest. Who is his rest? His rest is Jesus, the one who's died for us.